It's not often we get an English language examiner and exam board representative into the studio. This podcast is packed full of great advice about the upcoming English language exams.
Welcome to the Parent Guide to GCSE podcast. We're here with Catherine Oldham. She's a regional rep for Educas, one of the exam boards that your child might be studying. And she's a GCSE English language examiner as well, does lots of work with teachers on helping them to deliver it. So who better to ask, we thought, as to, how do I help my child through English language GCSE than her. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for joining us.
So
can I ask the first question?
You can ask the first question.
Right, Educas and WeGEC. What's the difference?
Well, I had this conversation before we started. It's officially WJEC. I've been saying WeGEC as a teacher for like 15 years.
Sorry.
So I discovered this evening, I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
We have many pronunciations. The WJ, WJEC, WeGEC, the W. I've heard all sorts of things. We are officially WJEC, which is the Welsh Joint Education Committee. That's a kind of legacy throwback to when qualifications were joint O-levels and CSEs, I guess, way back. But Educas is the English part of the WJEC. So WJEC is the company. We're based in Cardiff, but actually when the government last reformed qualifications, the Welsh government and the English government split slightly on what they wanted in terms of GCSE and A-levels. So in Wales, they still have GCSEs that are graded A star to G, and their A-levels are still split into A, S and A2, whereas in England, the government obviously wanted 9-1 GCSEs grading, and they wanted the A-level to be a linear 2-year course. So what we had to do is produce a completely separate brand name for England, which we used Educas, which is to denote that those exams are regulated for Ofqual for use in England for the general qualifications that is the GCSEs and the A-levels that we provide simply for England. There are still WJEC qualifications for students in Wales, and they're slightly different in most cases.
Excellent. So what you're saying is you've got a better education system in Wales than we have in England. However, it is what it is. I love the AS-A2 setup. I think it worked, but
but yes, that's good, because we get quite a few questions about that, because they'll get a printout from school and it'll say WJEC, and then they'll only be able to find Educas online, and it'll all get very confusing. I thoroughly enjoy the fact that every year when I input all the dates for the exam thing, we make a little personalized exam timetable generator for our members, and I have to put in all the exams for Educas and all the exams for WJEC. I wish they could just agree, but hey. Right, well, there you go. I mean, I've learned something already this podcast, so that's the way forwards. So let's get into English language then. I guess we'll start with the really big one, and then we can delve into some nitty-gritty as we go along. But the really big one that we get asked is, how on earth do I revise for English language GCSE?
And it is a big one. And on the positive side, I can say, actually, well, you don't really need to revise. If you have the kind of student who's always paid attention and has always been conscious users of English language, then there's nothing really to revise, because it's something you're doing all of the time, every day, throughout life. And that's on the positive side of things. It's all about skills. There's no content whatsoever. There's no content to learn as such, because everything you're going to be presented with on the day of the exam is completely new material to you. You will never have seen it before. And so the most important thing that you need to be doing is be receptive on the day to the fact that you're going to see something you've never seen before, and have the skills to work through that material to show that you fully understand the how, the what and the why of that material that you're dealing with on the day. So I see it as a positive, actually, that you can't really revise. And if you haven't really been doing what you're supposed to have been doing for the last, well, not only the last 2 years of GCSE, but actually throughout life, if you haven't been reading and conscious writers, then you are going to be struggling, because there's nothing you can cram at the end. It's way too late to revise. So I see it as positive. Some may not see it as quite so positive. What is positive is that because of all of the exam boards, the papers are split into reading and writing sections, and everything that you do in the reading feeds into the writing. The phrase I always use is read as a writer and write as a reader. So every time you're reading something, you should be thinking about how you could use that in your writing. Every time you're writing something, you're thinking, how can I craft this so that a reader can take from it what I want them to do. So those, the two sections of both of the, but all the exam boards have two exam papers. One is fiction, one is non-fiction. And the reader, and both are split into reading sections and writing sections, and they're inextricably linked. So again, that plays to the skills-based approach that students have, and to this, what I'm seeing as very positive, in that there's no necessity to actually put that last minute revision in. And everything you do in life feeds in. You know, it's English language for native speakers in the most part. So everything you're doing every day, everything you listen to, everything that's hitting you from all angles of social media is feeding in to what you're doing. There are little things that you can do to revise, which possibly we'll come back to from later questions. But for example, I have a massive issue with particular spellings. Something that always stops me always gives me pause for thought is, for me, guardian and guard, the A and the U. And your children, all students will have something. You know, the attendance, the ends and the ants, and the separate, or necessary. I'll come back to, you know, single and double letters in the word. There are things that they'll always, each student will have their own little thing, and coming up with little tricks and techniques for remembering those things that are going to throw you. I think, again, it's not necessarily, it's not revision as such, but it's just little tricks.
Useful little bits. I mean, we do things like, it's always useful to stay separate from a rat, because then I remember that it's the two A's. We've done a Spag Tips booklet with lots of those little tips and tricks with the common words, which is available as a free download for parents. So if you go to parentguide2gcse.com and go into services, I think, and if you go down to freebies, I think I've called it at the bottom. I've not looked for a while, I've forgotten, but it's lurking in there. If not, I'll make sure it is in there after we've recorded this. But yeah, absolutely, it's the thing that you see over and over from students and adults. We all have, as you said, those little hang-ups. Like, I can't write it without going Wednesday in my head. That's just how I do it.
Yeah.
Well, I've now got so with Guardian, the Under Armour brand has helped me no end.
Excellent. I like that.
And that's one that appeals to me. But I used to get my students, I was an English teacher for many years, and they all know necessary, don't they? It's necessary for a shirt to have one collar and, what is it? One collar and two, one collar and two sleeves. That's it. Or coffee to have, I can't remember that one. So I used to get my students to come up with their own for particular single and double letter problem ones that they have. So beginning is a big one. In the beginning, one of my students came up with, in the beginning there was one god and two nuns, which another student then took forward to say one god and two ninjas, which was quite
it's not a version I've heard, but I like it.
If it works for you. We do actually, just more serious note, perhaps, Educast, we have knowledge organisers for English language.
Yes, and I love your knowledge organisers.
Yeah, we have them for every subject, but for English language we actually have them, which is quite unusual. As you said, there aren't many specific revision things for English language. We do have them, and they focus on proofreading, and they focus on the particular skills for transactional writing and particular skills for reading, so skimming, scanning, locating materials, and all of those skills necessary for the English language exams.
Indeed, and we will pop a link in the show notes and along as we post this on Facebook as well, so that people can find that, because they really are brilliant. Yeah, they make a lot of sense, and it's all the little bits and bobs that have just all come together to make it nice and easy. Yes.
I mean, it comes back to, obviously, if you're year 11 and you've got 6 weeks until the first exam, something like that. There's not a huge amount you can do. I mean, is it down to technique at this stage? You've got to be aware of what's on the paper. Obviously, it's going to be a new question. You've never come across it before, but the setup of the paper is always the same, isn't it? It's the same questions. It's in the same order, whether it's the reading or the writing. And it's being aware of how long you've got for each section.
And I guess it's what the examiner is looking for to some extent. It's a bit like, when you take your driving test, they're going to be looking to get you to tick off these particular skills, regardless of what route they take you on. So, yeah.
But for the year 10s listening, or parents of year 10s listening, it's about reading. What's the quote about? Or turning up to the gym,
turning up to a weightlifting competition without having ever been to the gym. Yes.
And that's basically the message being, do some reading constantly. Well, not constantly. Make sure you're reading every week, whether it's a book, whether it's a newspaper article, whether it's online or physical book. It does not matter. But a lot of students don't do that. Yeah.
So any tips for parents who perhaps have a more reluctant reader? We have twins, and one of them you had to physically separate him from a book if you wanted to do anything. But the other one just is not the least bit interested. And the only thing we could ever really get him to read was sports biographies. But it took ages to discover that was a thing that he would do. So any stealth tips?
Okay, big question. They don't have to be reading books. Anything that they read is able to teach them the skills of skimming, of scanning, of locating evidence, of inferring attitudes from the reader. So the thing to do with those students is, as you said, recognize what they are interested in and get them to practice those skills in a subtle way, not by identifying assessment objectives and talking about English language specific terminology, but asking them, what's this writer trying to tell us about, Frank Lampard or whoever, Stephen Gerrard, whoever it happens to be, and how many different aspects of Frank's character can you work out from reading this particular passage, and what evidence is there that Frank can motivate the players in the changing room at half time, and using whatever aspect of reading that they are interested in. And in fact, it doesn't just have to be reading. Everything they watch on TV or on social media channels, they should be applying the same skills. Why has that producer of Love Island chosen to include that detail about that character? What particular aspect of Fred or Joe or Jamie are we supposed to like or dislike because that particular detail has been given to us as viewers? There's a lot to be, and the discussions around everything they're watching. And so not just particularly for the writing sections of English language, and again, all examples have very similar writing sections. As parents, you can do lots here, because what children tend to do in their writing, and I see this all the time with examiners, they're very general. For example, last year we had a lovely question that asked them to write about things that meant the most to them. And a number of children chose music. Music means loads to me. You can plug in your earphones, you can listen to music when you're doing your work, you can listen to music when you're running. Music makes you feel good, music makes you feel bad. But, and I can honestly say this, having marked hundreds of exam papers, not a single one of the students who wrote about music and how meaningful it was to them gave me a specific example of a band, an artist, a track, a lyric, a genre even. So as parents, you can push them to be more specific. So tell me more about that. We had a lovely question a couple of years ago. It was writing, tattoos. Should we have tattoos? What are the positives or the negatives of tattoos? Well, lots of generic stuff. Don't have a tattoo. When you're 30 and wrinkled, they'll look dreadful. Don't do that. But no real specific details about actual celebs who have tattoos, the good or the bad that those tattoos might do. Just the point I'm trying to make is the more specific they are in what they write about, the more they bring it to life and make it feel authentic and real and give examples, the better. So as parents, that's something we could be doing all of the time with just discussions. What did you see on that? What was happening on that YouTube clip you were watching before? Who was it? Oh, why did he do that? What was, the real detail that makes them move beyond the generic and makes them stand out and tell us something that fleshes things out. Watching Attenborough shows, if they're watching them, they should be writing about them. There's lots of tasks in terms of writing, and actually reading materials they'll find that are about the environment and the world today, and local newspapers, which they probably don't read, but that's something that you should be exposing them to, because lots of the things we ask them to write about are local issues. Your school in your particular, or your town, the local council's going to put a car park on the local playground, write a letter saying what you think about it. Well, if they can refer to very real locations and the very real impacts that might have in your area, all the better. As soon as I see one that actually mentions a very specific place, I light up when I'm marking, because I think, oh, that I didn't know that about Brighton. That's interesting. That makes it make sense, rather than just some kind of generic spiel about any shopping centre anywhere in the country. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
We might have moved away from the question there. It was about revision, wasn't it?
But it's really useful, because I think it's easy to forget that you're actually, the examiner is a real person, and they want to listen to an interesting story. If you're watching a TV show and it's just really blur, you turn it off. You want the details, you want the drama and the excitement and the intrigue, you want the bits that grab you. And so that's what you've got to start putting into your answers. I like that way of looking at it. And there are going to be a lot of students potentially listening to this going, seriously, I can revise by watching Love Island? Really? And that's, I think that's quite popular.
The conscious consumer of Love Island and thinking, that's why I learned that about that character, and that's why that character is using that language, and a conscious listener.
But it is edited, not trying to give too much away about the fact I occasionally watch it when one of the boys watches it, but it's edited in a way to provoke a reaction from the audience. It's very, very carefully and probably cleverly done. Yes. And that's the detail. If that was the question in another universe, that's what you're looking for. It's the why did they do this? What's the get behind the thoughts of the producer or editor, however it works. What are they trying to get the viewer to think?
And I guess that's a useful life skill as well, in terms of identifying possible bias. Why is someone telling me this particular story from this particular angle, whether that's in the media or in real life? Figuring out where someone else is coming from.
Yeah, and that's, if we just step back a bit, that's what English language is all about, isn't it? It's about being conscious users and receptors of English language, and exam technique will take you so far, but ultimately, certainly with our exam board, we want students to show, I understand this, and I understand why a writer is taking me this direction. I don't think I really addressed that idea of exam technique, but obviously, timing is where students underperform. It's often because timing, they've got that wrong. And, you would hope by this stage in year 11 that they've had enough practice that they know, this question, and this is our exam board specific, if this question's worth 10 marks, I have 10 minutes to write. And that's quite nice about our exam board, that's the way it works. 10 marks, 10 minutes, 10 marks, 10 minutes. So in terms of prep, time management, it makes it quite easy to handle. So you'd hope, and the other thing, of course, with the exam prep is the focus on the keywords in the question. And one of the questions you asked me, Paul, was what should they do? How much time should they take before they put pen to paper? And what they need to do is read that question, each question twice, highlight the keyword in the question. That's the focus of the question. And then as they're preparing to write, they should be highlighting the quotations that they're going to use in support of their answers for the reading questions. That's really the exam technique.
Yeah. So as they turn the paper over, do you suggest a full read? Well, a skim through. It's not a read through, a skim through, just to they understand exactly where the last question is, where the first question is. I mean, they will be aware about what marks are allocated to each question or each section. Generally, that never changes. So,
well, for the majority of students, yes, I would suggest a quick read through. But having said that, we have our particular papers set up so that students don't have to do that. If they've got particular problems with stamina, be that writing stamina or reading stamina or writing stamina, and they're likely to run out of time, the questions are staged so that actually they can deal with each question one at a time. So we have its section, so it will say read lines 1 to 10 and answer this question. The question will there. So actually the first thing students should do, and this is what we call our relaxation method at the start of the exam, is actually have a pencil and ruler, and draw a line under the section of text that each question relates to, and then they can methodically work through. So even if they don't think they're going to have time to read the whole thing first, that's fine, as they can deal with each question in chunks. However, for the majority of students, I would suggest a quick read through and then approach it in that way of breaking down the reading sections.
I think by underlining the section so they know where they're going to, it probably demonstrates to the examiner, not that you get any more marks for it, that's a good technique. They're showing a good approach to how they're going to answer this particular question.
It shows that they're focused, and it prevents them from being influenced from other parts of the text when they're being asked a question about one specific start of the text. It's important that they know where a text starts. And then as they move through the question, and this is, how our questions work, is that they enable students to show, they can see how a writer is developing an idea or an argument. If it's fiction, the writer will be developing a character. They'll be showing a character either building, a trait that's been shown to us at the beginning of a text will be exaggerated or it will be contrasted. If it's a non-fiction piece, that a point of view will be developed generally and reach a crescendo where the writer hopes we'll all agree with whatever point of view they've put across. So that's what the questions are designed to do. They're designed to lead students through the structure of the piece of writing and show how attitudes develop and possibly change and then reach a conclusion.
Yeah, so it's kind of almost detective work there. It's like when you're trying to figure out who done it and you're watching a thing and you can't skip a few episodes ahead because you're going to get confused. So yeah, I like the idea of chunking it, just making it feel that little bit more manageable.
Going back to the imaginary question about Frank Lampard. So there's a section of text about him, about a brilliant player, not so good manager, discuss all that kind of stuff. Sorry. Is it best to plan your answer on the answer paper, or do you do it on the spare piece of paper that's never going to see the light of day?
Good question. Well, with reading, I don't think they have actually got time to plan specifically. With reading, the planning part is the highlighting of the relevant quotations that you're going to use. So the planning will be in the booklet that has the source text on. So you'll be reading through about Frank and you'll highlight, oh, Frank was a very resilient player. I'll highlight resilient, like that, tells us lots about Frank. Oh, Frank was an inventive player. I'm going to highlight that one. So that's where the planning comes in terms of reading questions, because short amount of time really to plod through those reading questions. So the planning has to be focused on locating the evidence you're going to use. When it comes to the writing sections, we have a little bit more time. So I would suggest with the writing, they take 5 minutes to plan and to plan it on the answer booklet. It isn't actually marked, but it does demonstrate to the examiner that the student is thinking structurally. But more importantly than that, it makes the student write structurally. It's very off-putting as an examiner when you see something that one isn't paragraphed. So that's the first off-putting thing, because it's just a
wall of text. Yeah.
But that also means that the student probably hasn't thought, oh, I'm going to consciously structure it in this way to build it up and develop my argument in this way. So planning is really important in the writing sections.
No, I was just going to say one very quick. The paragraph thing is a massive bugbear of mine, and I'm not an examiner, I'm not a marker, but as a teacher, where I'm marking a long answer essay, I love paragraphs because you can see keywords in paragraphs, so you can see where they're going. I haven't got time as a teacher, I'm sure examiners are different, to read every single word, but I'm looking for those keywords in the paragraph that I can then understand what. So it is, that massive block of text is a huge no-no.
Yeah, the opening of a paragraph should have a topic sentence. It should signal the direction that paragraph is going to take you. So for something like English, if we've got, writing about zoos and what you think of zoos, then each paragraph should signal straight away in that opening sentence, this paragraph is going to be about, habitats and how they're, adapted for a particular animal. And that should be clear in that opening sentence. So if they don't have that plan, they don't have that topic sentence, it's a clear signal to the examiner that perhaps they haven't thought it through logically and have that clear structure in mind. You mentioned bugbears. Do you want me to talk about my worst one at the moment? No. This is a growing epidemic. And it's the lack of capital letters on, not only for I, the pronoun I, which is often, lowercase, dotty I, sometimes with a little heart over the top, but more often than not, just a dotty I. And also students who are failing to use capital letters for their own name, their friends' names, place names, titles of films and books. It's a huge issue, and one that certainly as parents we can look out for that.
And how much to blame do you think social media is for that? Just for sending messages, text messages, DMs, whatever.
Nobody deliberately, when you're sending a text, capitalizes the I in the word I, because it does it for you automatically. So you just type away and you just put I, blah blah blah, and it does it for you. Is that?
Yeah, it's massively to blame, and also fashion. I don't know whether you noticed in the World Cup last year, the England shirts, that they were in uppercase actually, apart from the letter I, which was lowercase. It was just ridiculous. But also, I went past a restaurant today, local to me, Bridge 63 or something, lowercase, no capital letter B. What? So it's a big deal. It does cause a problem sometimes. If they're writing a review, which they did recently, if you as an examiner don't recognize the title of the film or the TV show or the book they're writing about, and it's lowercase, you read it as part of the prose and you don't recognize it as such. So it's a big deal.
Some red flags right there. If an examiner says that, indeed. Anyone listening, please.
Capital letters, stop it, please stop it. It's a big deal. That's my biggest bugbear. And my next one, silly implausible statistics. When they put those in the writing, 97% of the world's oceans are covered with rubbish.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot of rubbish.
I knew it was a problem,
or not a lot of ocean. One of the two.
Some students have a checklist of techniques that they need to put into writing, rhetorical devices perhaps, and one of them is statistics. And some kids you can see they've got the little acronym at the side of the exam paper, DeForest, and they tick off each one that they've used, and statistic is one of them, and they put in any old statistic. Common sense goes out the window. It can be anything. 2 out of 3 people have died in car accidents.
Wow.
How many, sorry?
2 out of 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
These are all real statistics that I've read in student exam responses, and they're not convincing.
No, I can imagine they're not.
But I think that feeds back into your, it's not about reading novels and stuff. It's about just knowing general knowledge. It's about knowing the news, about knowing with car accidents, most of them aren't serious, and it's just a bit of bent metal, for example.
I promise as an ex-maths teacher that we spend quite a lot of time on percentages and out ofs and fractions.
I'm sure they've represented it properly. They just don't know what they're talking about, and they thought, I've got to put it in, so I will.
The content goes out the window, and they think, exam, I've got to press the examiner. If I put a statistic in, that's going to sound good. That sounds like real writers do. Well, they do, but real writers use real statistics. They don't just pluck something out and say 97% of the ocean is covered in rubbish. Be a bit more common. And actually, the better thing to do there is not to use made up statistics, but use real examples. When I was walking down my high street last week, I had to pick up 5 or 6 bottles from the side of the road, put them in the bin because of it. Just use things that are more kind of real to your own experience rather than plucking these things
So that statistics, the 5 or 6 bottles in 1 10-minute journey is a statistic.
Yeah, and it just feels more real than
Just don't say 536 bottles in 3 minutes as I walk along the road, because that might be a lie.
It's a little unrealistic. So I have a question that I mean we get asked quite a lot, and I don't know whether there is necessarily a right answer. But you were talking about the wall of text, and I was thinking about all the times I've seen students write in basically a flow of consciousness, as if they were just not quite even as if they were talking, because they don't necessarily full stop when they would pause at an appropriate moment. There's no paragraphs there. It's just like brain vomit, for want of a better phrase. And I was thinking that's something that I think often happens more with students who are perhaps dyslexic and don't feel capable of planning out their answers in the same way. They're just trying to write as they would speak, which sometimes works. But even as I'm doing this isn't proper full sentences. I'm kind of stopping and pausing and restarting things, and it wouldn't work as a proper answer on an English paper. So any tips for students who are perhaps dyslexic or struggling some other way with getting those thoughts down on paper, feeling like they can organize them and wrangle the words?
Yeah, really good question. We like voice. We like an authentic narrative voice, but you're right. When a voice spills into a completely unstructured rant, unless you're James Joyce or Virginia Woolf, you probably can't get away with it in a GCSE exam paper. So the best advice is to keep it simple for those students. Don't overcomplicate things in terms of the actual content of what you're writing about. Keep it simple. I came home, I couldn't find my shoes, found my shoes. We keep it simple. Something happens, something's resolved in terms of a narrative, for example, or a nice, clear line of argument. And then keep it simple in terms of construction. Use more full stops than you do any other punctuation device. There are a large number of students who struggle with basic punctuation, and by that I mean the difference between a comma and a full stop. There are students who comma everywhere, the comma splice, we call it, there's commas all over the place. They don't know the difference. And again, that all comes back to reading, doesn't it? And not hearing. So I went to a school fairly recently where they had a number of students like this, and they've completely banned the comma for certain groups. They're not allowed to use commas until they've mastered the full stop. Now, obviously, you would hope at GCSE level, students would be able to use full stops, but many of them can't use them accurately. So I think keep it simple, and if in doubt, use a full stop rather than a comma, for those students who really struggle to express things, and go for more rather than less. If you have a paragraph, you look over your paragraph and there's no full stop until the end of it, you're probably running over in terms of your sentences, and you're probably causing your reader a few problems in understanding what you're talking about.
So I guess if you're almost writing down your inner voice, imagine that you're explaining whatever it is you're explaining to your nan or your baby brother or someone who you would really simplify things for, because that helps you to keep it really simple, keep it really short, easy sentences, making sure I'm clear, rather than the ramble or the rant you would do to your mum or your best mate or whatever about the drama that happened at school today, because that could go on for a while. Can you tell we have a daughter?
Yes.
Yeah. So just I think that's nice, easy kind of advice to follow. Just keep it nice and simple, and voice is okay. Just
voice is great, and actually for students hoping to elevate their writing, that sense of narrative voice and having a really engaging sense of self. Or if they're not comfortable with self, they can become a persona. That also works, particularly for really good writers. Either of anything that creates that narrative voice, both in terms of fiction writing and non-fiction writing, that's something to elevate writing at the top end, certainly.
Fabulous. I think, well, lots of nuggets in there. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that's a real, quick win or
just something particularly important? If there are any more bugbears that are worth mentioning to teenagers ahead of exam season, it's always good.
Well, keep things plausible, particularly in terms of narratives. No scary forests, abandoned cottages, those things. They haven't got, they go wrong. They're not good stories. You've got 40 minutes or so to write these narratives. They're never good. Avoid kidnapping. Avoid
love this.
Just keep it real. Keep it. The word I would use is plausible. They can be imaginative, but the world of the imaginative scenario has to feel plausible. So that's one thing. In terms of the reading, keep it focused. If we're asking about, if we've asked a question about how Frank motivates, then focus on how Frank motivates and not how Frank does anything else in his life. And really keep it, in terms of the reading, really, really focus on those keywords in the question and getting to the heart of the meaning. Vocabulary is one I haven't touched on, sorry. You can be doing, again, this is one to do as a parent. If they're, and I'm certainly guilty of overusing particular words and not stretching my own vocabulary. Stretch the vocabulary. When you're having these discussions about social media and so on, try to get them to branch out and be a bit more concise and precise with getting to the heart of vocabulary. Just saying something is positive or negative, it's too vague. Get to the heart of what makes something positive, negative, why Frank is motivated, what aspect of Frank. I don't know, I'm not a Frank Lampard fan.
He's in the news. That's the only reason I think he's come up today. Really? So yeah.
I'm a Liverpool supporter. Frank's never really been on my radar. But anyway,
I should have said Steven Gerrard. I'm sorry.
We should have done. Alan Hansen, he's my man. But
there we go. Wow.
Throwback. But yeah, keep it focused and really kind of track through that text and tell the examiner that you understand why the writer has done what they've done to make you feel a particular way.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Good place to finish. Any other?
So there's so much good stuff in there, and some real reassurance, I think, for both parents and for students, that whilst it's not a subject where it's here, memorize all of this content and cram all of that in your brain alongside all the other subjects that you're revising. It's a skills thing, and it's communication, which is, we've all heard the argument from students, when am I ever going to use this again? Well, with English language, that's a very, very obvious always. So
yeah,
there's building those skills is something that's only ever going to benefit you, and there have been lots of ways we've talked about that students can do that. So yeah, I think that's going to help out a lot of parents and a lot of students. Thank you so much.
Okay, lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the Parent Guide to Education podcast. Please favourite or follow us on your preferred podcast app to ensure you get notified as each episode is released. We'd also be grateful if you could leave us a great review or rating. See you on the next episode.